Let's look a little closer at the Christian elements of Beowulf. Now, we have to remember that at the time that Beowulf was written, the writers were already very much Christians. They had traveled, or at least their ancestors had traveled across the waters from Scandinavia to settle in Britain. Missionaries from Rome, who were the original Christians, had gone across what was previously the empire and taught the Christian religion. Because of politics or other reasons, a lot of people had become Christian. That isn't to say that they have forgotten their pagan past. We look at Christmas and the winter solstice, plus we can look at Easter, and in the springtime, there are many elements that people would say came from pagan Rome. This is very true if you look at Christmas tree, or you look at the rabbit, or you look at when we actually have those holidays. They are very much related to the time when Christians in Rome, they received the missionaries and were baptized, and they took the pagan holidays and transformed them to have some kind of a meaning to them. The same with the writers of Beowulf. They were very much Christian, but they took a lot of elements from their pagan past of the ancestors and wrote this story with a lot of themes that are not considered today very Christian. But when you look at the details, you can see a lot of Christian influences within the text. We start off at the beginning of the poem when this good king is introduced. Now there's a couple things about this good king. First off, his people worry because he hasn't had a son born to him. It's not unusual for the need of a son to be born to take on the kinship for the next generation. What is unusual is the language that's used to describe the importance of having this son born. Before he's born, there was no hope. There was a concern that things would just go wrong. When the son is born, it is described as a blessing from God, and that birth brings hope to the people who had, for some reason, lost hope. Now that brings to mind the birth of Jesus Christ, which is a blessing to everybody for the hope of mankind. Now the king himself is a Moses figure who, when they put his body on a ship to send it off and have a funeral for him, it describes this story of him having, as a little boy, come across the waters mysteriously with a load of gold and silver and treasure to be found. And of course we know with Moses, he was blessed by God, hidden in a reed boat, and discovered. So there's those elements of Christ and Moses and these other things at the very beginning of the poem, before any of the story actually takes place. Then we have the Grendel figure himself, the monster, which comes to Heorot, which was just barely built. And you have this joy and this festivities and all these things that are really bothering Grendel. That's what really leads him to come and kill everybody, is his jealousy at the happiness of these people. Now what bothers him about the reactions of the mead hall is that all this happiness and joy is in some ways false. It was built on family members going against family members and killing each other. And yet here they are, remaining at the mead hall, celebrating for no real reason. Grendel himself is a relative of Cain. In fact, he is a direct descendant. So interesting that all the monsters that spring from this story come from that moment when Cain killed his brother Abel and was cursed by God. So that's where all the wandering spirits and all the other creatures of evil came from. Of course, Grendel is a direct relative of Cain, who had killed Abel, and therefore was among the most evil of creatures. Now he has been given a curse of wandering the earth, causing a lot of grief and evil amongst people, amongst humanity. In this case, Grendel was allowed to go to Meadhall and cause destruction because of the past and how the happiness of these people came from a very dark place. For 12 winters, Grendel is allowed to attack and kill all these people in the mead hall. Now you'll notice also that the number 12 shows up a lot. One of the places where this number shows up is at the very end when Beowulf himself is having a funeral. He's put on a boat like the first king of the story and sent off to who knows where. Now those 12 go around the boat and kind of act as a witness of the greatness of Beowulf. Although Beowulf himself is not really considered an analog for Christ, there are many Christian elements associated with him. Sometimes Beowulf is like Paul, who goes around and tries to secure peace among everyone within the kingdoms. And at other times, he's a Christ figure who brings salvation to those who are racked in the torments of hell and the monsters. When Beowulf lands in Danish territory, he is more of a Christian missionary figure, having come over from a far-off land with his warriors to bring peace and destroy the evil of the once pagans. If not a representation of Christ, at least as a leading missionary like Paul, his mission is to bring salvation to these pagans. In fact, one of the things that the poem describes is how these pagan Danes had prayed to their pagan idols in hopes that they would be saved by them, but it is worthless. There's nothing that would save them from this Grendel monster. The only thing that the praying to the idols did for them is remind them of some vague memory of hell's tortures. When Beowulf actually enters the mead hall and starts talking to those who are there, he tells a story of going out and swimming with, I guess, a friend of his, and the friend turned back and had to go to the shore, where Beowulf went out and he swam and dealt with the monsters that were out there, and then swam back and seemed to boast. One of the attendants called him out on that and said that Beowulf was the last one of the two swimmers to come ashore. He couldn't have been that strong if it took him as long as it did to win that race in the water. Beowulf shoots back at him and says, "I fought all these creatures. He got afraid, he turned around, he landed on the shore. I had to actually go down to the very depths of hell, kill this creature, come back up, and then get back to shore." But then Beowulf says, "No matter what I did, good or bad, I'm not the one who killed a brother or killed a relative of mine," pointing back to the person who made an accusation and saying, "I fought devil, I fought the monsters, I survived. You gave in to your base instincts." So he made a case that his strength is more than just the ability to kill creatures, but that he doesn't do things that are morally repugnant. Going back to fighting Grendel, at first it seems that nothing can kill the creature, but Beowulf says, "I'm taking everything off and just going pretty much naked to battle this thing and kill it." Of course, when Grendel comes a second time, he wrestles with it and fights with it and eventually rips off the arm of this creature, who runs back to the lair basically to die. Now, if you look at that, what he's saying is that he can't use earthly methods to defeat this creature. This creature is not really of this earth. Although physically he can defeat it, that is only because as a person who is pure and uses only what God has given him at birth, can this sinful creature be destroyed. In some ways, what this is saying is that we can only fight evil with our God-given talents and what we have as humans that are born here on this earth with nothing. Sin is not defeated with swords and armor and weapons. It must be defeated at a very personal level. Now, when he goes to fight Grendel's mother, he actually has to go down into the very depths of hell. When he goes down with this sword that was given and named as a present to defeat Grendel's mother, he finds that he cannot destroy Grendel's mother with this sword. But also, he can't defeat it on his own this time. Grappling and wrestling does not do anything like it did with Grendel. He starts to worry that he's going to lose this. Sure, he defeated a few monsters on the way down, but even those above who are waiting for him to come back are wondering, is this all? Is he dead? Is this a waste? But he finds something else while he's fighting Grendel's mother, and that's this sword. Interesting enough, we later learn that this sword is shown to have a lot of markings on it representing the deluge or the Noah's flood. So he uses this sword to kill Grendel's mother. Although we can defeat sin through personal means, it takes the sword of truth or the sword of God to destroy evil altogether. Now, when he comes back up, it is again kind of like Christ when Christ went down to the darkness after he died to defeat both death and hell. And then he comes up as a savior figure to say, I have defeated these creatures. I have defeated sin. The waters themselves become purified, where before it was filled with all these creatures and waste and destruction. So like Christ, who went down into the depths of hell and then came back up righteous, the world no longer had to fear the evil monsters. Now, as a king, Beowulf had to defeat a dragon. In medieval times, the dragon was a stand-in for evil that had to be destroyed by righteous knights. In this case, the dragon is called the Evil One, which is probably a direct reference to Satan. Now, when he goes in to defeat this dragon, it turns out that he's old and he can't defeat this creature alone. Now, everyone else fears this creature and runs away, but there is this one person who stands by his side and fights with Beowulf. Once Beowulf is killed by this dragon, then this assistant comes in, finds a weakness, and destroys the dragon. Because of the curse of the dragon, the treasure that is left behind is really not worth anything to this world. In fact, 8 men took the treasure and put it on the boat once Beowulf died to send off with him and to be burned. Now everyone mourns for the passing of Beowulf. And again, you have these 12 people who go around the boat before it's sent off. They are probably representative of the 12 apostles of Christ who mourn the loss of Jesus when he dies, but will eventually pass on the gospel to others. Now, lest we think that Beowulf is a positive Christian message, the ending doesn't really give hope for the future, either pagan or Christian. There's simply a sadness that Beowulf will be gone, and once he's gone, then all these other nations will come in and destroy the Geats. What we know of history, as explained one other time, is that's exactly what happened. Knowledge of what exactly happened to the Geats is missing from history. Most likely they were defeated, as Beowulf explained would happen. Neither paganism or Christianity saved them. That is a bold statement by the writers who by this time most likely were very faithful Christians. Maybe it's just a statement of how they miss their own heritage and wonder, where did it go and what is our future? Consider these questions. How does the Christian parts of the story contribute to the whole? What can be learned from Beowulf about competing cultures working together? Why do you think the author told a story from a lost past seemingly unrelated to their world?